We'll check your presentation. Dr.
I,
Haas, you
I
have
have it.
presentation.
I have it as PowerPoint, and if I can share it, should I share it now?
Yes, you can share and check it, Ignas, and also you can speak a bit about the publication opportunity that the South Asians mainly have with the Globe Ethics, and also about the journal that you are in charge, that Ethics Journal of Ethics in Higher Education. So a bit about that will be helpful when you say.
Yeah, that will be nice. Yeah, yes. Rajula ma'am, you have your own journal, right?
Globe Ethics, and Ignas is the publication manager.
Publication
So
managing editor, yes. So it
and
will be
he
nice if he talks about that, give an introduction to that.
Ignas, could you please cover that also either in the beginning or at the end?
At the end, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think your PPT is fine.
Yes,
it's
it's okay,
moving.
fine.
Okay. So 1 more minute left. We are live on YouTube.
How much time do I have, more or less?
It is 90-minute session, so you can take as much as you need. 1 hour 15 minutes or 1 hour 20 minutes, or you can take, and then let's see if there are no questions. You could actually utilize the full time speaking about mainly the journal and also the publication opportunity, the book chapter contribution. So you could speak about that. You could cover that also towards the end. Normally 1 hour 15 minutes you can take, and then if there are questions, then with some announcements we'll finish. Okay, so it is time. It's 6 o'clock.
We're launching now.
Oh, I will launch, and Ignas, could you please close your PPT?
Dr. Ignis. Okay.
He's there. Good.
I stop sharing it, or how do I do that?
Yeah, you can stop sharing, and yeah. We are live. Dr. Smiley, you can start.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all to the International Faculty Development Program on Ethics in Higher Education. Today marks day 5 of our enriching journey together, and it's a great pleasure to have all of you back as we continue to explore the vital intersections between ethics, governance, and higher education. The focus of today's session is institutional governance and ethical policymaking, an incredibly relevant and thought-provoking topic in today's rapidly evolving academic environment. We are honored to be joined today by Dr. Ignace Haas, a distinguished scholar and senior managing editor of Globe Ethics Publications based in Geneva, Switzerland. Dr. Haas holds a PhD in philosophy from the University of Geneva, and his academic work is deeply rooted in the philosophy and ethics of punishment with postdoctoral research conducted at the University of Freiburg. As managing editor, Dr. Haas plays a pivotal role in shaping Globe Ethics scholarly contributions, including Journal of Ethics in Higher Education, which is a diamond open access journal offering global and intercultural perspectives on ethics, academic integrity, and the philosophy of higher education. He has also contributed to several important edited volumes, such as Ethics and Overcoming Odious Passions and Walking with the Earth, Intercultural Perspectives on Ethics of Ecological Care, which reflects his commitment to advancing ethical thinking, particularly in the global south. Dr. Haas' editorial philosophy focused on bridging the gap between the academic excellence and mentorship, especially for scholars from regions with limited academic resources. His work continues to empower and uplift academic voices from the global south, ensuring that the diversity of ethical perspectives is represented on the global stage. In today's session, Dr. Haas will provide us through the complexities of institutional governance and ethical policy making, and we look forward to learning from his wealth of experience and expertise. Without further delay, please join me in welcoming Dr. Ignace Haas to the session. The platform is yours now, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Smiley, and distinguished colleagues from St. Peter's University in India. I'm really very glad to have the opportunity to share some insight. As Dr. Smiley said, I'm a philosopher and I'm also the managing editor of Globethics. I'll start by giving you some insight on some of my reflections on responsible governance from the point of view of three major theories that have been very highly recognized and discussed in the 20th century and proved to be influential back then. And I was trying to reassess today whether these theories are still relevant. I'm referring to three major ways of conceiving norms and responsible governance. One related to discourse ethics, as we say in German, which is the communication or communicative action related understanding of ethics and governance that we find in Habermas's work. This is a major 20th century scholar who was very, or is still influential by providing, I think, a very insightful view on how far communication is important in our world, not only as a factual phenomenon and technical phenomenon, but also from the normative point of view. So this is first a perspective that I would define and then critically assess, bringing me to two other perspectives. One which has rights as its core, and this is a way of, in fact, deflating a little bit the discourse aspect that was present in the first perspective by concentrating our attention to the fact that often discourse is about rights, and rights are usually elements that are object to mutual consent in a scheme of collaboration, and so there are in fact important aspects related to rights. And Dworkin was also a 20th century important source to reflect on the importance of what he was saying, taking rights seriously, or defining, in fact, the point of view from which norms would be considered major from the major point of view of the perspective of rights. And I will arrive to the core of my presentation, which is, in fact, considering that both these first views are very important, but both limited for different reasons. And that, in fact, in our time, in particular in the 21st century, with important tools of communication and challenges related to communication, and also the expression of mutual consent for rights, that we need to come back to, in fact, an analytical definition of what normativity is. And this brings me to one of the founder of positive legal systems, Herbert Hart, who I think has a very decent, simple, and rigorous way of defining what we understand by norms and responsible governance in particular. And I will, in fact, articulate the positive and a very helpful way of rereading this 20th century author and putting his dogmatic view on law and regulations and norms in practice in the 21st century. Let me share my PowerPoint. Yes, so the criterion of responsible governance, excellence in responsible governance, as we would like to put it very clearly in the organization for which I work, Globethics. We want to focus our mission on developing, in fact, a framework of excellence in responsible governance. I'm asking, in fact, the question, how far these three sources that I just mentioned could be, in fact, read and interpreted again to define these two concepts. In fact, how far communication can enlighten responsibility or norm formation and definition, governance, so to say, in a more complete form. This is a first question I will try to define and answer. And second, I'll have the same thought experiment to find out how far right-based approaches are also embedded in the semantic of being responsible, responsibly governing, because we all know that if there is not a mutual consent around rules and types of behaviors that are proven to be effective and bringing benefits to a group of persons or institutions, then governance is not working properly. So this mutually beneficiary aspect, which is often tied to right-based approach, right-based approaches will be the second part of my presentation, where I'll be discussing, in fact, the important aspect of this finding, but also the necessity for me to come back to redefining, in fact, in a more sober and simple way, responsibility and governance, where in fact rights would be just one type of responsibility and governance, but we would need to in fact tackle the whole picture, which entails also to take duties as a core element of responsibility. So how do we define, in fact, norms of duties in such a way that they can be, in fact, implemented and applied and in a responsible way, meaning with a certain minimal level of natural law, if you wish, so an understanding of what is wrong and right, but not increasing too far this layer of natural law, because I mean, we have several ways of understanding values and morality, and it is of interest also to reduce this semantic about values to really the minimal, very functional layer, I would argue, in my presentation, in order for it to be as universal and as effective as possible. At least that was the conviction of Herbert Hart and his positivist logical view. But I think that nowadays we tend to come back and consider very seriously this view as a very good candidate in a world where we have multiple stakeholders with multiple values in a pluralistic environment it is often very important to have a very precise notion of this responsibility concept. And governance, of course, related to rules of practice will be presented. And of course, rules of practice are very widely used in our semantic and common language, but often people don't have, in fact, the original, I would say, definition of these concepts, which yes, this is sometimes the role of the philosopher to just repeat these to some extent theoretical groundings, but that are in practice very helpful, just at least to check that we have them right. So I'm passing to my presentation, if this works. Yes. So yeah, ethical leadership for a just, inclusive, and sustainable world. That's the vision of our organization, Globethics. And so as international NGO worker and philosopher, I have both hats. I'm the managing editor for Globethics, but I'm also a trained philosopher, and I thought that I would try to share some reflections on the mission of our organization, which is empowering individuals and institutions toward excellence in responsible governance, where we have, as I was just introducing, these two concepts, two notions of responsibility and governance that are really articulated in very explicit ways, and therefore, in fact, it is very interesting to come back to what classical philosophers say about these norms or these concepts. And we have, in fact, a very good occasion to reflect shortly on the foundation of norms of governance, and to define what responsible norms have to do with responsibility. What are the key attributes that, for instance, classical natural law theory might bring? And one of the ways of conceiving this responsible governance is to be able to engage in a discursive ethical justification of actions with Habermas. So it needs to be always possible to have a discussion among a large extent of participants to a scheme of collaboration. So this is now for Habermas open to what extent it should be related to peers with very special qualifications. I think for Habermas, this is not so much the case. Discourse ethics is for him opening a space for civil society integration into decision making, and it is, of course, very horizontal as a structure of justification, of ethical justification to start with, and then, of course, when it comes to normative understanding, so to include discussions about how do we found legal structures, norms of obligation, justification of duties. It is even far more pronounced. And second, I will bring the norms of mutual consent and this level of mutual engagement on what norms authorize to do or rights with Dworkin in the forefront, because I think that, in fact, a large part of what Habermas was wanting to say with his discourse ethics is to, in fact, engage properly in a very expressive way with what concerns, in fact, mutual rights. And so by answering, in fact, Dworkin's worries about the boundaries of taking right seriously, we partly answer also Habermas' framework. And thirdly, I will come back, in fact, to after criticizing Habermas' view on communication and Dworkin's extreme focus on rights, I will come back to, in fact, what I consider the classical framework, which is, in fact, redefining rules of practice-based norms. And these are, by definition, either duties or authorizations, rights, but with a very thin responsibility structure, a minimal natural content of norms in the language of heart. And the virtues of such a minimalistic natural law or responsibility structure is that it focuses a lot toward future-oriented behaviors. So the more you focus on responsibility as engaging a very heavy moral structure about what are, complex definitions of what it is to be really responsible. I mean, I'm thinking about philosophers such as the classical thinking about mutual recognition theories, back to Hegel, to more classical understanding with Levinas, considering the face-to-face relations, when you consider also alterity, all these definitions of responsibility, very sophisticated, are engaging all sorts of elaborations that are sophisticated elaborations of responsibility, very important ones if you take, the ethical, metaphysical perspective on responsibility. But in order for norms to function in organizations, in light structures that need to be very flexible and to move forward, adapting, in a world which is changing, it is, of course, important to take very seriously the possibility of preventing cheating, possibility of preventing misbehavior, punishing eventually also all sorts of misbehaviors, and therefore having a well-defined structure for what we call integrity. But in my presentation today, I would rather put the emphasis not on responsibility as the core metaphysical and academically loaded concept of integrity, but rather as a minimalistic structure, which is intended, in fact, to be as much as possible preventives, therefore future-oriented, and not backward-looking as much as possible, in order to have the capacity, in fact, for organizations and individuals to as much as possible navigate in a very active and dynamical way. And I think that Hart's concept of practice-based norms is one of the lightest and the most, I would say, enlightened way of conceiving responsibility, because of this his critique, in fact, of more heavily oriented structures of responsibility. And I will try now to elaborate on this. So one entry point is, of course, my essential entry point now is that there are three great models of legal philosophy that we can invite to provide us with elements of comprehension in what we do in a civil society organization, for instance, but also in in a private structure, also private institutions. You might also in governance private institutions have to have also precise notion of responsible governance for your institution. And in the jargon of the philosophical jargon, we have in fact very interesting norms. We have the possibility to conceive responsibility as a principle of communicative action with Habermas. We have the positivist view of legal norms with Hart, which is based on rules. And we have the way of understanding norms as mainly doing things with rights, so taking rights seriously with Dworkin. And the central question of my presentation is to see how far it can be a polyphony. So it's not so much about extracting who is right, who is wrong among these three main philosophers, but trying to, in fact, conceive a polyphony where we would have, to some extent, a layer of Habermasian communication favored. We would have another layer, perhaps a fundamental layer of Hartian rule-based governance structure and responsibility. And we have a small aspect or a larger aspect devoted to a Dworkinian way of taking rights seriously in our structure of responsible governance. And so the point of my presentation is to give different forms to this polyphony and ask the question which one we should prioritize on these three conceptions with regard to the concept of norm and the concept of responsibility. But again, what is important is to understand that I don't say that one is wrong, the other is right. All these three models are, so to say, very classical models, and they both have pro and contra. And so I start by giving you here an outline of some great philosophical insights into responsible governance by shaping, 4 or 5 points here, which would make understandable either to those who are already familiar to legal philosophy and applied ethical aspects related to governance from a philosophical point of view, or to those who are less familiar but who want to, in fact, engage in this work of crafting these concepts based on a model of what philosophers have been doing in the past, and that might, help you, save you a lot of time in order to compile, in fact, your model of governance, your official documentation, which will obviously have practical aspects, but also have some theoretical grounding. So duty and authorization in Hart's theory is really almost reducible to the idea that a duty or a right is always a rule. And one of the key questions about reducing rights and duties to rules is, but what is the level where threat and commandment enters into play when you consider rules? And there is a very well-known criticism of Hart of Austin's model, which is based on the command theory of rules. So for Austin, by contrast to Hart, there is no sense of speaking about rules without having, in fact, a policeman, so to say, present there to implement by secondary measures to enforce these rules. And what Hart, in a very interesting way, tries to do, and I think very successfully brings on the table, is that these commands-backed model of theory is in fact missing the point of what it is to follow a rule. So what is following a rule is not complying to rules. Complying to rules can be reduced to this idea of a command theory where you have a threat and then you are pushed to, you have an incentive, a very strong incentive to comply, and then you follow in fact some kind of habit of behavior, and you can engineer the way you want that a collective body operates. This is not at all what Hart has in mind, despite the fact that he has a very strong positive idea about also a utilitarian understanding of conventions and justice. So he's not far from the idea that there should be an observation of what functions in real world and not the theory, and what functions in the real world can be measured. It is measurable. It is subject to the observation of the behavior, and you can quantify results by observing populations, and then experiment different types of conventions and models of rules. But what is important is that instead of bringing, in fact, the benefits of this utilitarian tradition only based on the capacity of bringing a kind of positive eudaimonistic result, which is to have happiness and the prevention of suffering as the final telos, so the highest good, if you wish, in your ethical theory, which would justify these norms. He says that, in fact, by qualifying in a utilitarian hedonistic view these conventions, we are falling back to a value-based theory, which for him is not ideal, because the problem with value-based theory is that there are a lot of different sets of values, and values can conflict. And so he would want to have another standard, a more robust standard than just values, for instance, happiness, or preventing of sufferance. And he found this to be, in fact, in a truth-based model. So it's a cognitive model where you follow a rule because you understand the rationale of the rule. So all rules need to be communicable and understandable. And then, of course, there is a secondary implementation model of the rule where you have a certain level of threat if you don't comply. And if some of these rules, are very essential rules for the functioning of a collective body of individuals, then you might have a secondary set of rules that would punish eventually those who don't comply. But the following a rule per se, so the definition of the concept is not reduced to the command theory. It is instead really about understanding what it is to be a rule of practice. So it is really the emphasis on praxis, on the capacity to put, in fact, conventions in practice, where Hart, in fact, is, I think, very interesting. And this, of course, comes on a second level, also in response to the need of having natural law justification of rules reduced ad minima. So it is not a large pyramidal structure of norms that we want to have to answer for the effectivity of our following rules, because it is not because you have a fantastic geometrical structure of norms, as Kelsen, the excellent other philosopher of law, 20th century from Austria, was drafting a pyramidal structure of norms in a very Germanistic tradition of norm building. This might be intellectually compelling, but it is not because it is pyramidal that your structure will be followed. You follow norms because you understand what is a rule of praxis, and you are engaged in this community where these practices are in fact living practices, and it is not because they have a shape of a pyramidal structure. And so natural law needs to be reduced, in fact, to really have a thin layer, and this is all about also criticizing the idle natural law theory of Locke that is very strong in the philosophical tradition, which basically says that you have always a natural law model in a heavenly, a Platonic world, and that these sacred norms will in fact answer for the ideal foundation of your rules. But of course, there should be a very rigorous logical structure of your norms, but this structure should be minimalistic and be in fact reduced to principle-based structure, where you have the articulation of duties, and you have the articulation of authorizations, the two great family of norms for art, and this is in fact answering for all the sub species of norms that you might find. For instance, changing the rules, for instance, is a kind of authorization that you might have to define when by election or other structures a leader is changed, or we appoint a leader to a certain position, is a right because it has to do with a particular authorization related to what a leader can do and should not do. But the essential structure of changing leaders is a set of new authorizations, so new ways of conceiving the second type of basic norm for art. And I want now just to say very simply that, yeah, if we understand that there could be a polyphony between these three views, I need also to come a little bit more in details into what the two other family of views on norms and responsibility are. And rights taking rights rigorously is the challenge that Dawkins will bring to Hart's view on the definition, in fact, of norms and responsibility, because one thing is to analytically have a precise definition of these concepts, but another thing is to deflate eventually rules as such, and say, but they should always kind of relate to mutual consent. And this is something, of course, is open to discussion, but it is certainly a major point of entry, in particular when rules come in practice, and when there are problems with regard to how people follow rules. And one of the major role of a judge or systems of checks and balances in an institution, when you have a an ethical policy document, and you have a set of norms and rules that that you have to follow. Of course, at some point, if there is a problem, one needs to define from a high point of view, which in Dworkin's famous book is the one from the judge, which are in fact the major problems when rules are not compliant with. But let me, before I continue to come into details with regard to Dworkin's critique to Hart, let me also remind us about the importance of expression and communication, which is the third model that I'm bringing in polyphony. Discourse ethics, legal validity, and facts are three concepts that are very tricky with regard to the communication-based model of responsible governance. Why? Because if you take discourse seriously as really normatively crucial in order to to give, in fact, access to your norms and to have responsible ways of following your norms, you find immediately with the problem of defining what are facts and what are, in fact, norms, because discourse is at the same time related to a very factual component. You know, when you speak, you exercise your capacity of language. You are in a system of comprehension, mutual comprehension. There is a context of the discourse, and there is the capacity for people to morally or ethically or agree on a political, agenda or on a strategic agenda in an organization. And this layer is kind of related to the capacity for the stakeholders to express their concern, their needs, their capacities, but it is also related to a purely normative aspect, which is sometimes mixed with the factual component of it. So another aspect of expression is that, of course, daring expressing concern is stepping outside of the analytical normative practices, and it is very helpful to have this capacity of daring expression. And it is often the problem in institutions, in structures, collective structures where human collaborate, that people don't necessarily dare expressing their concern. And so I would argue that it is, for me, unquestionable that a level of communicative ethic is always necessary because of this risk inside institution or a larger collective engagement, human engagement, that people in fact lack this a proper incentive to express their concern and proper canals to whistleblowing, to manage whistleblowing problems and solutions. For instance, for whistleblowing, but there are various ways of communicating in institutions, and these canals are in fact essential for the well-functioning of the organization. The problem of factual inequalities is also one of the key aspects that a discussion about rules and norms and rights doesn't necessarily tackle in a very effective way, because you might have rights without having equal rights, right? So what about the inequality in our system of norms? This needs also not only a rule-based model to some extent, but also the capacity to claim for rights, which is to raise concern, which is to communicate. And so communication still, anchors very neatly to some extent responsible governance. But I'll start by 3 and 4, which are these communicative definition of norms and responsible governance, and provide a critique of the ethics of communication based models, because I think that in our day, we are often, in a very paradoxical way, also facing a situation where we have a simplistic understanding of communication, which is counterproductive for the model. I give very simple examples. We might desire to truly communicate, but the fetish of universal communication should be also pointed out as a problem. I mean, universal communication is a myth. It is truth that we, as social animals, we have the capacity of thinking, we have linguistic capacities, humans, and therefore there is a semantic about the universal capacity of humans to communicate. But to have a universal communication idol can be much more than that. It can be understood as really thinking that communication is so wonderful, when communication is often bringing to catastrophic situations as well. So one need to have, in fact, the conditions of discussion in mind always, and these conditions are often not idle, but toxic. For instance, in limited cases, they may there may be situations where really discussing about, you know, the matter of concern, hot topics, is not done because, and for good reasons, people fear that it becomes existential. That, you know, if you if you talk about the problem which occurs in your organization, for instance, following a whistleblowing system of control, you need to have in place also a way to protect your whistleblower. So because just the fact of course, raising concern might expose the persons who are raising this concern to existential also aspects of just communicating. So opening discussion may cause, in fact, irreversible effects. So one needs also to be aware about that. And there are examples in recent history, the Brexit in UK, for instance, and there is a very nice article I would recommend you to read from the British philosopher Goethe on Habermas, which I list and I will share further at the end of my presentation, where he's very critical, of course, of Habermas, and says that there was only a minority of critics of UK in the EU system when the whole process of election started, but this raising of a concern had a snowball effect, and there was a kind of spin-up which lost control totally in the media about the position of UK in the EU, and now there are many people, many friends from UK who regret, in fact. But what is sure is that from a distance, you can assess the situation and say that there was not necessarily a widespread concern, but a large media coverage about a limited number of parties who raise some concern has spread, in fact, or spin up the communication about potential risks and existential risks of keeping UK in the EU, and this has had, in fact, irreversible effect, so to say, because of course UK, as you know, has left EU. It's just an example, but there are many others. Compassion and remorse for the suffering of Ukrainian people following the Russian special operation that started in 2022 has also had, of course, direct consequences on stopping diplomatic relations and discourse with Russia. we have here a situation where instead of having a discourse that is shared among the parties, we stop with some of the parties to talk, and we start having public declarations on how European nations could ally against one of the parties, and eventually also engage in a long range of economic sanctions. But here we are in a situation where not talking may also spin up too, and where in fact we see that communication is a very sensible function of our human organizations, and we need to really assess and take tremendous care in how we do it. Accusation by the UN Commission and media campaign that Israel has committed genocide is another example where, in fact, we have difficulties of translating into opposition to Netanyahu's politics something which is quite a widespread concern in BRIC countries. We see that in EU countries still there is a mix of opposing concerns, but the point is that although there is a growing discontent communicated across civil society, even in Israel, and across the world, the normative and legal sphere, in fact, doesn't follow necessarily these concerns. And because there is a so-called no man's land of the non-international armed conflict situations, and it's very difficult sometimes, even if you have very clear concern, you have documented concern regarding unacceptable situations, you might have normative legal limits to have results in resolving these problems. So the ethical problem related to discourse is, in fact, that discourse is not neutral, but changes in situations, that the power of the better argument is not irresistible, and you are not always in a situation where the better argument is the clear and will be then implemented. The problem of public speaking, you might have a lot of public speaking, but recognizing that one is wrong is something tremendously rare. It is truly remarkable how much leaders, I mean, I'm thinking about the US leader, are publicly speaking, but without recognizing that they do mistakes when, I mean, obviously everybody does mistake, but the proper institutional balance of power in making decisions backed by real expert discussions is very important in institutions, and just speaking or making public declarations is very easy and should always be done carefully with a strong preliminary expert discussion. So there is also the liberal fiction of what is universally communicable to everyone is always what is desirable. But of course, there are many situations where communication is proven to be positive. There are, if we reflect on on what communication means in a historical context and geographical context, we see that there is no such thing as an invariant in the structure of generating normativity, good or bad, related to communicative action, as Habermas was trying to in fact persuade us. Instead, all context is different, and this analytical normativity that I was trying to stress in my with regard to the rule-based definition is very shaky when it comes to a communicative structure of definition, because communication and concepts are distinct animals. The solution is first to, of course, distinguish between the comprehension of the discourse and the conduction or the conducting of ethical decision making or agreeing morally to an injunction. So it is important to, as I was saying before, to consider that communication is largely empirical. It's largely related to an imbalance of capacities of express ideas, cultures that are different, and level of education that is necessary in order to have an elaborate way of discussing ideas, and therefore it is distinct from the agreement that you might find by discussing with someone at the end of a discussion, and the trust in which you need, in fact, to be engaging into projects and building governing norms. I want also to, of course, mention proto-ethical values. So there is a mix of proto-ethical values when it comes to leadership and governance. We often have the temptation to think that the more authority we have, the better our norms will be effective and understandable even. And in fact, of course, this is not true. The authority is a proto-ethical system of norm. It doesn't mean that it is not interesting proto-ethical norm, because as any family father recognizes it, it is important to have some authority when the whole family is sitting around a table, to have a structure in an institution when you have a team meeting with a governing body and the direction engaging on the strategic perspective of an organization. So authority is also present in church organization. It has in politics, of course, very important dimensions, but there are all sorts of proto-ethical values, sexual dispositions, aesthetical inclinations. All these are proto-ethical because they are not, strictly speaking, sufficiently based in ethical reflection or norm or values, and therefore they might be helping to some extent ethical judgments or considerations. I give an example. We just did a book with colleagues at Globethics on aesthetical values, education, and ethics, and it appears that aesthetical contemplation really is a unifying factor of the experience. So if you have an aesthetical experience in front of you, you might have a truly remarkable occasion to unify your experience along these aesthetical values that you are observing and contemplating. And this might help you in order to get then on a second level a more precise, more neat picture of your ethical systems. So they might be bridges across these proto-ethical values and ethical values, but to make it short, I would say better to have first a good definition of your norms of governance and responsible governance, and then you can always have a more baroque structure where you would add bridges around other sets of values. So why discuss ethics matters also greatly. It is, of course, because expressing normatively and expressing normativity is important in building networking pacts. It can bring effective leadership by answering needs. One need to dare communicating and expressing outside just analytical practices. we said that, we gave examples. There are case studies of problems of inequality. I mean, there are plenty in the world, and these have to be tackled very seriously when they appear. So I'm not at all, with all respect for minorities, for inclusive aspects with regard to governance. I'm not saying at all that this is a secondary aspect of governance. I just said that claiming for rights means communicating at a minimal level. But it means also much more. And one needs structures of good governance in order to articulate these claims. One needs, for instance, a whistleblowing system in order to get in an enterprise, for instance, a proper feedback on ethical behavior. And so what we have with communication is profoundly dual character of the communication concept. We have the empirical, which is an unproblematic dimension. I mean, at least if we possess the minimal skills to express ourselves, which is not met by everyone. I mean, you might have situations where just becoming older, you lose some of these skills, or these skills are becoming need to be trained and might become less easy to be used. And so you need also, of course, to have between two or several transmitters and receivers a process of communication with a common code. So you need to agree, in fact, on the language. But the second condition is the far more tricky. I would say it's the maintaining of a relationship based on mutual trust and understanding. And there are, of course, ways of linguistically propose a sleight of a hand instead of an argument in discussions. There is the problem of the lack of logic and credibility and trust in some of the discourses. And so the claim of transparency when we transmit a position is to have a clear transmission of these positions and not to play with the blurry aspect that communication might quickly have. Reasons are always at hand when we communicate. We need to have a well-balanced sight on why we take this position and why this position makes sense instead of an opposing position. And this has to be discussed or exposed in a way which is clear to all the parties. We need to remain open to counter-argumentation, to acknowledge, in fact, the opposition, the possible oppositions, the opposing views, and explain why our argument is stronger. And the style and tone of the expression need to inspire trust and respect. We should not be arrogant. We should be adapted to the audience that we have. And this brings me to the problem of manipulative distortions in communication. There are, of course, situations where there is such a widespread communication on social media, on informal discussions, that communication is distorted. So it means that we are not anymore in a situation of communication. We are instead in a situation of pseudo-communication. This is a fiction of communication. This is a rhetorical masquerade. And here communication is inflicting, in fact, self-inflicting a defeat to the principle of communication per se, to the ideal framework of communication. But it is, I think, important to note that the context of communication can be problematic. And of course, the solution would be to have forms of communications that are free of forms of social domination. So it is to have a situation where really the speech is based on a responsible norm structure of governance. And here, the better the governance, the better the structure of communication, so to say, in IDLE. But of course, communication should not be weaponized. And this is the bottom line of the problem of communication, is that we need, in fact, to define analytically the norms. And so I'll come back to the two main families of structures of norms, duties and authorizations, because in fact these rule-based norms are not sensitive to language or interpretation, but they are really incorporated in practice-based habits. And this is very important to pause a second and really to sense how important it is that for norms, instead of being really strictly bound into language and communication and interpretation, there are, in fact, if we reflect on norms analytically, they are instead practice-based, rule-based structures. So we need at some point, in fact, to pause with the principle of free speech, that it is bringing intrinsically positive outcomes, and instead see that, in fact, the idle speech position that is supposed to prevent the distortions in communication, we should appeal to a principle-based norm structure, or an idle norm based on the definition, analytical definition of norms and responsible norms in particular, because I mean, it doesn't need more effort, so to say, intellectually or in terms of energy of engaging when it comes to an idle state of our reflection on norms, to have either one or the other. And here, of course, we consider, in fact, a behavioral type of view on communication as sufficient for most of what we want to do with language when it comes to norms. I wrote a few years ago an article on trusting truth stronger than untrusting lies. So communication is not so much a problem because there are plenty of distorted communication and lies, but it is because you need, in fact, to trust stronger, in fact, truth, that you are untrusting lies. So we need, in fact, to engage in a mechanism of definition of what are these truth markers in our definition of responsible governance and norms, and so one can then put aside really all the risks that are inherent to different ways of course of communicating. And I want to thank you, and I give you here a bibliographical insight on what I've been presenting. So on these three thinkers, Habermas, Dworkin, and Hart. And I give now, as I was invited to do, a short insight also in what we do at Globethics in the creative invitation for you to participate in writing on what you think responsible governance is in, for instance, AI governance. We had a fantastic work done by our founder, Christoph Stückelberger, on AI governance ethics in 2 years ago. We have, of course, in mind that you in India have such capacities in ethics related to and governance related to emerging technologies, that for sure you could, of course, help us to better understand how we apply responsible governance in the sector of emerging technologies. And we want also to be very grateful for all the papers that we receive in our journal. We have a journal which is Journal of Ethics in Higher Education. Here you see on the side of our Asia hub, I have put the cover of the journal of the last issue of our journal, and we have a number of Indian scholars contributing in each issue of our journal. We are very grateful for the interest that you have for Globetics and Globetics journal, and we have, of course, various regional structures at Globetics, which are meant to bring an international insight, a holistic insight on what we do in excellency and responsible governance. And you have, of course, with my colleague Rajula here, a perfect example of how it is possible to collaborate. And I show you here the last issue of the journal, which was precisely focusing on practice-based approaches in education, contemporary thinking of leadership, the issue number 6 of our journal, which is in 2 volumes. So you have exactly 20 contributions from 4 continents by experts also in education sector. So you really have here a source which is, I think, interesting for your institution, which not only deals with responsible governance, but also with the sector of education. And I want to thank you really for your patience and for listening to my presentation, and I'm welcoming your questions.
Dear participants, if you have any questions. Sir, already we have 2 questions in the question and Q&A box. What is the relation between good governance and improving performance in higher education institutions?
Well, it is true that defining success and impact is really a challenging one, because I mean, if you come back to the ancient philosophers, we have in Stoic philosophy the idea that success is kind of a divine gift, and you are not, in fact, and you are never entirely responsible for your success. And I think that this brings the idea that, of course, we need to govern our institution in such a way that we adapt to the world in which we live and to the needs of our constituency. We have particular stakeholders in a higher education institution. There are 3 groups of stakeholders. You have the students, you have the teachers, and you have the administration of the university. But these constituencies have also timely challenges to really deal with. For instance, with emerging technologies, AI, generative tools are, for instance, bringing a lot of nightmare and policy changes for the administration of higher education institutions, at the same time as they are giving a lot of benefits, because you can now devote to automatized tools part of your work, and which functions very well. We have already reports on how far, in fact, higher education institutions can manage in a distance learning context with generative technologies, part of the, for instance, question and answer to service to the students. And so very practical aspects of the work can be streamlined with automated structures. But the core concern about, when you have a problem of, ethics, for instance, because let's say you have a journal and you have a multiple submission in your journal, and you have an author who has submitted to your journal but has submitted to 3 other journals. What can you say? What can you answer to this author? So this needs, of course, a clear line policy on the matter. Multiple submission of articles is something which is not ethical. I mean, in the publishing sector and at the university, we try to communicate very transparently on the importance for a student, for an academia to make a choice. In fact, you submit your document to one institution and sign often a declaration that you have not submitted it to different institutions, because of course at some point this has a cost for all these institutions that are processing your demand if you retire from the process. And so this is just an example. There are many examples where you cannot automatize, in fact, the processing of your concern, but you need, in fact, to have someone stepping in and saying, no, we don't accept, in fact, your reaction with vis-a-vis what we do. We want to remind you kindly on our policy. We have a written policy, and please follow this policy. The same for generative AI. How far can a generative AI be used? This need to be defined, and there are policies that are defining the use of these tools. But this is also something which needs to be updated almost on yearly basis, because the tools change, and how people use them change as well. So I think it's important to not want to overreach in an institution. We need to take all these 3 constituencies very seriously, and divide the work into these 3 constituencies, so that each one is addressing in a limited but defined way the problems, and then we can hope to have an impact, because we'll have in the long run proven that we are organized and bring a benefit to the community, bring benefit to the students, bring benefit to the young researchers and teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hans. We have another question. How does sustainability affect governance in universities?
Excuse me, how is sustainable?
Yes, sir.
It's in the Q&A box. How does sustainability affect
How does
governance?
sustainability affect governance in
Oh, yes.
universities?
This is a very important matter. I think with regard to education, sustainability is really a matter of concern. One needs to honestly say either one doesn't care with sustainability. If it is the case, it's possible for certain structures to really be honestly defining the scope of activity in such a way that you know that you can limit, you can have limited means and for a limited time, and therefore you cannot engage in a sustainability based, so to say, approach in a very long run. And this needs to be tackled as a challenge for the organization, and also a communicative and normative challenge. And there are on the other side large institutions, and your university is probably one of them, where you can really define in a sustainable framework your activities, and I really would encourage to do so. Education is certainly one of the rare human engagements and activities where it matters greatly to have sustainable institutions engaging into it. And the example is, of course, that there are so many different ways to provide a service to minority groups, for instance, in countries, poor people who who have very difficult economical situations. You might have ways to help providing for the coverage of the fees for certain part of their curriculum activities. You might also consider that there should be a way of defining, in fact, who would benefit if you would wish to have a structure that that tackles inequalities in such a way that you can counterbalance in a way the factual situation to some extent. I give an example. If we have quotas, for instance, for benefiting of a certain amount of funds for writing, for instance, PhD thesis after you submitted your PhD and you have been rewarded with an excellent grade. This is possible, but it may be also something where we could look into the social economical condition of the participants and help really those who have the more needs in priority, because this has a great impact. As you all know, it is well known by social research that the capacities we have in a society with regard to cognitive and linguistic and all type of capabilities for having the best possible curriculum itinerary at the university are really divided in a way which is not just related to an economic and social structure. So it is really across the board, and so therefore there are many people with moderate and humble conditions which would deserve, in fact, a particular attention. But this is a policy, and this needs to be, in fact, engaged into with an institutional insight, and Globetics can help also to monitor this type of policies. We have certain expertise in that, and this is a very good question, of course, and an immense question, because of also sustainability can be understood in different ways. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? So I have a question to you. Do you think governance should be changed based on the needs of students?
Well, governance has to be forward-looking. As I was trying to articulate in my presentation, the more we have a future-oriented structure, and I try to explain that with a very thin layer, so to say, on the part of the definition of what responsible governance is, can help to push the system that we have in place in a forward-looking system, instead of always being stuck with the past and looking backward and trying to solve the past issues that are still pending. The more we have this forward-looking structure, the more we might swiftly adapt to situations where a group of persons would deserve a particular attention, and I would put needs in the group in this type of group of persons So this is a deserve-based structure. So we would have partly a system which would have a strong rule-based system of structure, but part of it could also have a desert-based layer, and it is either done on the, as I was trying to articulate, on the capacity of the rules themselves to have a right-based approach, and therefore you might have, either with a claim for rights or as a general structure of authorization, the capacity for these rules to provide some benefits to a group of participants, but it would introduce an inequality. Or you can have a project-based engagement where you define yourself in your project to tackle with particular problems that you observe in your environment, and you try to solve them. And I think both these systems are good. The more we have a universal type or a system which is a one-fit-all, the more rational it is. But the world in which we live is not a rational world. It's a world where we have certain realities. So one needs to take the life that we have seriously. It's not because we have a system of governance that is articulated as I was trying to articulate, that we are not human beings with our values, our commitment and engagement with our humanistic values, for human values. And therefore we need, in fact, to as part of the reality and part of this human reality, which is the truth, to also responding to these groups of persons and concern, but of course it's difficult to have standards that work all across the board. So one needs to take one by one, I think, all these issues. If you have an example, I could try to articulate more in an example. Well, for instance, they might be concerned with regards to leave a certain space for communication, to get, in fact, the sense that there is a need. Because as I was in my polyphonic presentation of responsible norms, I was heavily criticizing the communication-based structure, but it is not because discourse is not always idle that that discourse is not needed. It's our oxygen. We are communicative animals, so we need to always open places where people can raise their concern with regard to their capacities to engage in the responsibilities and their roles and their activities. And we have, I think, better chances to deal with problems of inequality with regard to resources. You mentioned resources, by opening clearly and transparently on the criteria that we accept for instance, bringing financial means for instance, financing publications. At Globetics, we have a publication fee for our publication. So this means that normally you should pay some costs if you wish to publish your document, for instance, that you would want us to process in our publication pipeline. But if we understand that you have a certain limitations for what you can pay for the service, we would encourage you to also think about how you can raise funds, in fact, by engaging institutionally with your university or with other institutions into a system of raising funds for a project. And we were talking about sustainable education. I think that it is not so difficult to raise funds for education. It's in fact one of the only places where people are offering funds, because they understand that it is really the future of our young generations that are in question, and they are concerned by providing to some extent yes, help if it's in the framework. There are institutions who offer grants, but one needs to study these grant applications. They have very limited structures and scopes, but one needs to invest, in fact, enough time in studying these grant applications, and so you can find, in fact, some solutions for these problems related to needs.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Okay, so we have come to the end of the session of day 5.
Thank you very much for
Yes.
listening and
So
inviting.
Yes, sir, please.
There is a question in the chat box. Did you
Chat
take
box,
it?
ma'am.
Yeah, in today's governments, is today governments accountable to the people in real sense? What is your opinion? It's in the chat box, Ignas, you can see.
Yes.
It's in the chat box.
From down
We are
third
talking about governments, so and the question is whether governments are accountable to the people in real sense. And this is, of course, a very important question. I think that one needs also to define what is to be accountable, because there is often two distinct ways of defining the way we relate to a system, which is a state system, for instance, which would deliver some services, but have also some costs. One is a transactional way of associating. The other is an associative way of engaging. If I take the associative way of engaging, you can imagine, for instance, that you have historical bounds with the country where you are living. You have a certain debt, for instance. You consider you have a moral debt for being part of the community where you are living, and therefore you consider yourself accountable and agree on certain burdens related to your membership in this association, if you wish, or associative way of understanding your role with regard to the framework of the duties and the benefits that you might take out of being a citizen in a country. And this is the associative way. Many people are keen to be understanding their role in this framework. And there is another framework, which is the transactional framework, where in fact it is in proportion to what I receive and to what I take that I would, in a way, like an economist, assessing what I can extract from as benefit from being part of this collaboration with, the community where I'm living, and this can be enlarged to the country where there is a government running this country, and you might, for instance, consider if we are responsible of benefiting, of walking on roads that are cleanly structures and built, going to schools that are public schools, decently functioning, transportation systems that are in place, decently functioning, and all these benefits that we are in fact extracting from our environment are in fact due to certain consent that we give in fact to benefit from all these things, and therefore we might in fact in return have certain also debt that I would say to pay back, so to say, in a purely transactional logic, and both these two systems are in fact very good, but also limited. And there is a tradition which is called academic anarchism, which is not at all, anarchism in the sense that you are a terrorist or a fundamentalist, or that you are posing bombs because you don't agree on something. It is not at all that way of understanding anarchism. It's more in an intellectual way of trying to assess, in fact, the benefits and the costs of a political or non-political association, and often these views are in fact questioning both the associative and the transactional understanding of political obligation, the obligation we have to obey the laws, for instance, and they propose in return to build in fact associative frameworks that could help us in fact to protect and defend our interests when these two previous models of associations are not working as they would need to be working. And I'm convinced that many of the very sensible leaders of our countries, governments, do what they can to lead on a large engagement framework, the whole country, including our proper interests. But it is worth always to try to engage collectively with regard to our interests, and we don't need to necessarily just consider the top head of the government as interlocutor, but we can already each one on our modest level build associative frameworks and be stronger by doing so. And the school, the university, the journal, the clubs, there are different type of associative engagements that you can have. The church, of course, church-related organizations. I've been for 7 years elderly in my parish. I mean, they are related to the education of your children. Also, all sorts of associations that are very helpful. There are environmental associations. There are technical associations. And all these are very helpful, and at the end can bring what I would say the top governance from a country might not fully deliver as a service, as a yes, accountability, if you wish, of what is needed from bottom up, because you have top down and you have bottom up, and we need a governance which is integrating both directions of command, in fact, to have addressing issues from the bottom and at the same time having these issues addressed from the top in a very sensible and informed way.
Thank you, sir.
Ma'am, no more questions. We
So,
can finish
yes,
it.
on behalf of the organizers and participants, I would like to extend our heartfelt thanks for your presentation today on institutional governance and ethical policy making. Your deep philosophical insights on responsible governance and ethical decision making were truly enlightening and thought provoking. Your ability to connect the core principles of philosophy with the practical aspects of governance in higher education has provided us with a new and invaluable perspective. The emphasis you placed on the moral responsibilities of educational institution in shaping just an ethical academic environment has left a lasting impression on all of us. We are grateful for your time and for sharing your extensive knowledge with us. Thank you, Dr. Ignace Hans, for your invaluable contribution to our program. We hope to have the privilege of engaging with you again in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ignace.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks a lot. See you soon.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, I'll close the meeting.